The massive human ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars through the wide windows. His hands were steady, but inside he felt nervous. This was the most important day in human history. "Captain, we're getting close to the alien station," said Lisa Rodriguez from her seat at the science station. She was the best alien life expert Earth had, and her voice was calm but excited. "The readings are incredible. That thing is bigger than our entire moon." Jake nodded and looked at the huge structure growing larger on their screens. Nexus Prime was unlike anything humans had ever built. It looked like a crystal city floating in space, with towers that twisted and turned in ways that hurt to look at. Lights of every color flowed across its surface like water. "All these years of dreaming about meeting aliens," said Colonel Ben Harper from behind them. The military man was tall and serious, with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Never thought it would feel so scary." The communication system made a soft sound. A voice spoke in perfect English, but it sounded cold and unfriendly. "Human vessel, you will dock at Bay 7. Do not deviate from the path we are sending you. Any sudden movements will be seen as hostile." Jake felt his jaw tighten. 3 years of trying to contact these aliens, and this was how they talked to humans, like they were dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. "Understood, Nexus Prime," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. "We're honored to be here." There was no reply. The docking took an hour. The alien technology grabbed their ship with invisible forces and pulled it into a bay that was 10 times bigger than it needed to be. Jake wondered if this was meant to make humans feel small and unimportant. Ambassador Elena Wright joined them as they prepared to leave the ship. She was a smart woman in her 50s who had spent her whole life getting ready for this moment. Her job was to convince the aliens to let humanity join their group. "Remember," Elena told the small team, "we represent all of humanity today. Everything we do and say will decide our future among the stars." The airlock opened, and they stepped into the alien station. The gravity felt normal, but the air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. The walls were made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Waiting for them were 3 aliens, each one completely different from the others. The first looked like a walking tree made of clear crystal. Light moved through, its body like blood through veins. The second was hard to look at directly because it seemed to be made of flowing gas held together by a shimmering suit. The third looked almost human but had blue skin and 4 arms. "I am Quillshard," said the crystal being. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I speak for the High Assembly. You will follow me and speak only when spoken to." They walked through halls that were both beautiful and frightening. Other aliens moved past them, some flying, some crawling, some that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. All of them stopped to stare at the humans with what looked like disgust or amusement. The assembly hall was enormous. 12 different types of alien beings sat in a circle around a raised platform in the center. Each group looked like they could destroy humanity without even trying. Some had ships the size of Earth's moon. Others had technology that could change the laws of physics. Jake and his team were led to the center platform. He felt like an ant standing in front of giants. Quillshard's crystal body flashed brighter. "Members of the High Assembly, these are the humans, the new species that thinks it deserves to join our ancient alliance." Sounds came from the alien groups. Some sounded like laughter, but not the kind that made you feel good. Others sounded like anger or annoyance. Elena stepped forward. She had practiced this speech 1,000 times, but Jake could see her hands shaking slightly. "Great beings of the Assembly, humanity comes before you with respect and hope. We offer our friendship and our unique gifts to your alliance." She began to show them human achievements on a holographic display. Cities that touched the clouds. Ships that could cross the solar system in days. Medical advances that had defeated diseases that once killed millions. Art and music that could make people cry with joy. But as Elena spoke, Jake noticed something that made his heart sink. The aliens weren't impressed. They looked bored, like parents watching a child show off a drawing made with crayons. "Your cities are primitive," interrupted a voice that sounded like ocean waves. It came from a being that looked like living water. We built structures that span entire star systems when your species was still living in caves. Your medicine is crude, added another voice, this one like the buzzing of a million insects. We conquered death itself 2 million years ago. Elena's face stayed calm, but Jake could see the hope leaving her eyes. She tried again. Perhaps our technology isn't as advanced as yours, but humans have other qualities. We're creative, adaptable, and we never give up. This time the laughter was louder and more obvious. One alien that looked like a floating brain surrounded by tentacles spoke in a voice like static from a broken radio. Every young species thinks they're special. You're not the first to stand here making these claims. Quillshard raised one of his crystal arms, and the hall became quiet. Humans, he said, and the way he said it made the word sound dirty. You have achieved faster than light travel only 50 years ago. You still fight wars among yourselves. Your planet is divided into hundreds of arguing nations. You have barely explored your own solar system. He paused, and the light inside his body pulsed brighter. We have watched species like yours rise and fall for millions of years. Most destroy themselves within a few centuries of reaching the stars. Those few that survive must prove themselves worthy over many thousands of years. Elena tried one more. Time. Great, Quillshard. We understand we're young, but... Silence. The word hit like a physical blow. The Assembly has made its decision. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Confederation. You will return to your small corner of space and remain there. Do not expand beyond your current 12 star systems. Do not attempt to contact other species. When you have matured sufficiently, perhaps in 1,000 years, you may request an audience again. The other aliens made sounds of agreement. Jake felt anger burning in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry now would only prove their point about humans being primitive. Furthermore, Quillshard continued, you will accept monitoring stations in your territory. We must ensure you do not become a threat to galactic peace. Elena's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the pain in it. We understand your decision, though we disagree with it. Humanity will remember this day. See that you do, said Quillshard. Perhaps it will teach you humility. As they were escorted back to their ship, Jake noticed Lisa working quietly with a small device. She was always curious about alien technology, and apparently even this rejection couldn't stop her from trying to learn. The trip back to their ship felt like the longest walk of Jake's life. The aliens they passed no longer looked at them with amusement, but with something worse. Pity. Once they were back on their ship and moving away from the station, the team sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Elena spoke. Well, that could have gone better. Ben Harper's voice was bitter. Arrogant bastards. They treated us like children asking to sit at the adult table. Maybe that's exactly what we were, Elena replied sadly. But Lisa Rodriguez was looking at her device with growing excitement. Captain, I managed to intercept some of their data transmissions while we were there. Most of it's encrypted, but there are some words I can read. What kind of words? Jake asked. Lisa's face was pale as she looked up at them. Emergency protocols, something about evacuation plans. And there's one word that appears hundreds of times in their most secure files. What word? Devourers. 3 months had passed since the humiliation at Nexus Prime. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Earth's largest space defense platform, watching the star maps with growing concern. The platform orbited high above Earth. Its massive sensors pointed toward the galaxy's edge. Admiral, we're getting another one, said Danny Walsh from his station. The young man was Earth's best codebreaker, and his fingers moved quickly across his keyboard. Another star system just went dark. That's the 15th one this month. Kate frowned as she looked at the display. Red dots marked the locations, where star systems had simply stopped sending any signals. No distress calls, no final messages, just silence. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Something was moving through the galaxy, and it was heading toward the center where most civilizations lived. Any word from our spy satellites near alien space? Kate asked. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her computer. She was a specialist in artificial intelligence and had been working day and night to break alien codes. The aliens are scared, Admiral. Really scared. Their communication traffic has increased by 300%. They're moving entire fleets and evacuating planets, but their public broadcasts keep talking about routine exercises. Kate walked over to the main display. The disappeared star systems formed a rough line moving inward through the galaxy. Whatever was causing this was systematic and unstoppable. Have we figured out what those emergency files Lisa found were? Talking about? Kate asked. Amy nodded grimly. Some of it, yes. The word devourers appears in connection with something called the Ancient Enemy and the Great Hunger. There are references to something that happened 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years, Kate repeated. That's a long time to hold a grudge. I don't think it's about revenge, Danny said, turning in his chair. From what we can understand, these devourers don't think the way we do. They're more like a force of nature. They consume entire civilizations to fuel their own growth. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying they eat people? Worse than that, Amy replied. According to the alien files, they break down everything at the atomic level. Planets, ships, people, even stars, if they're hungry enough, they turn all of it into energy and materials for their own purposes. The communication system made a soft beep. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen. He was calling from the UCS Liberty, which was now patrolling the edge of human space. Admiral, we've got refugees, Jake said. His voice was tense. 3 alien ships just crossed into our territory. They're badly damaged and asking for help. Kate straightened. What kind of aliens? Mixed group. Some of those crystal people, some gas beings, and a few others I don't recognize. They're in rough shape and they're scared out of their minds. Bring them to Luna Station, Kate ordered. We'll meet them there. Luna Station was humanity's newest and most advanced research facility, built inside a crater on the far side of the moon. It was also the most secure location in human space. If these refugees were carrying some kind of disease or had been followed, it was the safest place to study them. 2 hours later, Kate stood in the station's main docking bay watching the alien ships arrive. They were beautiful vessels, even damaged as they were. Their hulls showed burn marks and strange corrosion that seemed to eat away at the metal itself. The aliens who emerged from the ships were clearly refugees. Their usual pride and arrogance were gone, replaced by fear and desperation. Some were injured, others seemed to be in shock. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez was already there, along with a team of medical experts and translators. She approached the group of crystal beings carefully. We offer sanctuary, Lisa said in the alien language she had been learning. You are safe here. One of the crystal beings, smaller than Quillshard but similar in appearance, stepped forward. Its light was dim, almost flickering. Thank you, it said in broken English. I am Sharplight. We have nowhere else to go. What happened to your homes? Lisa asked gently. Sharplight's entire body shuddered. The harvesters came. They came and took everything. Our world, our people, our ships, everything. Harvesters? Kate stepped forward. Is that another name for the devourers? You know of them? Sharplight looked surprised. How? We intercepted some of your communications, Kate admitted. We know something terrible is happening, but we don't understand what. Sharplight was quiet for a long moment. Then the crystal being began to speak, and its words sent ice through everyone's veins. 10,000 years ago, the harvesters came from beyond the galaxy. They are not like us. They do not build or create or love. They only consume. They eat entire worlds, break them down into nothing, and use the energy to make more of themselves. How? Did you stop them before? Amy asked. We didn't stop them, Sharplight replied sadly. 4 species sacrificed themselves completely. They flew their ships directly into the harvester fleet, using weapons that destroyed both them and the enemy. The harvesters that survived went into deep space to sleep and grow stronger. Kate felt her heart sinking. And now they're back. Yes, more of them than before. Much more. They have learned from their defeat. They adapt to our weapons, our tactics, our technology. What worked before does not work now. Another alien approached, this one from the gas-being species. It spoke through a translation device in a voice like wind through leaves. I am Drift Cloud. My people fought the harvesters for 3 days. We used our most powerful weapons, our best strategies. Nothing worked. They learned from every attack and became stronger. How many are there? Jake asked. Thousands of ships, Drift Cloud replied. Maybe tens of thousands. And they build more every day from what they consume. Kate exchanged glances with her team. This was worse than anything they had imagined. What about the Confederation? Are they mounting a defense? Sharplight's light flickered even dimmer. The Confederation is in chaos. The High Assembly argues about what to do while entire star systems fall. Some species want to run to the other side of the galaxy. Others want to surrender and hope the harvesters will spare them. Will they? Lisa asked. No, said a new voice. Another alien had joined them, this one looking like a walking squid with silver skin. I am Flow Current. I have seen what the harvesters do. They do not negotiate, they do not show mercy, they only consume. Kate looked around at the assembled refugees. How long do we have? At their current speed, they will reach the galaxy's core in 2 years, Flow Current replied. Your space? Perhaps 6 months after that. So we have less than 3 years, Kate said grimly. The Confederation will fall long before then, Sharplight said. They fight in the old ways, with honor and tradition. The harvesters care nothing for honor. They adapt to everything the Confederation does. Kate felt a strange sensation in her chest. It was fear, but also something else. Something that reminded her of her early days in the military when impossible. Odds had made her fight harder instead of giving up. Tell me about these harvesters, she said. How do they adapt so quickly? Drift Cloud answered. They consume our technology and learn from it. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they analyze and develop defenses against. Within hours, our best weapons become useless. Amy stepped forward. Do they adapt to everything the same way? What do you mean? Flow Current asked. I mean, do they learn in predictable patterns? Is there a logic to how they adapt? The aliens looked at each other. Sharplight spoke slowly. Yes, they follow logical patterns. They analyze the most efficient ways to counter our strategies. Kate felt something click in her mind. She looked at Amy, who was smiling grimly. Admiral, Amy said, I think I know what you're thinking. What are you thinking? Jake asked. Kate looked around at the group of humans and aliens. The harvesters adapt to logical, predictable strategies. But humans, we're not always logical, are we? Danny laughed suddenly. You mean our tendency to do crazy, stupid things that don't make sense? Exactly, Kate said. These aliens have been fighting the same way for millions of years. They think in patterns, follow rules, use logic. But humans improvise, Lisa finished. We do things that don't make sense. We take risks that seem insane. Sharplight's light flickered brighter. You think your unpredictability could work against them? Kate looked out through the station's windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was consuming everything in its path. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were falling one by one. But humanity had something those civilizations didn't have. The willingness to be completely unreasonable. I think, Kate said slowly, it's time to show the galaxy what happens when you ignore humanity. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez had not slept in 3 days. She stood in the Luna Research Facility's main laboratory, staring at the twisted piece of metal on the examination table. It was a fragment of harvester technology that the alien refugees had brought with them, torn from one of their destroyed ships. It's alive, she whispered to herself for the 100th time. The damn thing is actually alive. The metal fragment pulsed with a faint blue light, and Lisa could see tiny structures moving inside it like microscopic machines. Every few minutes it would change shape slightly, as if it was trying to adapt to its new environment. Dr. Amy Foster walked into the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. Any luck figuring out how it works? Lisa accepted the coffee gratefully. It's not just technology, Amy. It's some kind of hybrid between machine and living tissue. Look at this. She pointed to her computer screen, which showed the fragment's internal structure. See these pathways? They're like neural networks, but they're made of metal and crystal. So it can think? Not exactly think, but it can learn. Every time I try a different test on it, it adapts. I used acid on it yesterday, and within an hour it had developed resistance. This morning I tried electricity, and now it conducts power instead of being damaged by it. Amy leaned closer to the screen. That's incredible and terrifying at the same time. The scary part is how fast it learns, Lisa said. Most evolution takes thousands of years. This thing does it in hours. The laboratory door opened and General Ben Harper walked in with a man Lisa didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and thin, with messy brown hair and clothes that looked like he had slept in them. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Foster, I'd like you to meet Rick Bradley, Ben said. He's our best engineer and he has some interesting ideas about fighting the harvesters. Rick shook their hands with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Please, just call me Rick. I've been reading your reports and I think you're looking at this the wrong way. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? You're trying to understand how it adapts so you can predict what it will do next, Rick said, walking over to the examination table. But what if the goal isn't to predict it? What if the goal is to make prediction impossible? Amy set down her coffee. Explain. Rick picked up a wrench from Lisa's toolkit and looked at the harvester fragment. This thing learns by analyzing patterns, right? It sees what we do, figures out the logic behind it, and develops a counter-strategy. Right, Lisa nodded. So what happens if there is no logic? Rick asked. Then, before anyone could stop him, he hit the fragment with the wrench. Rick, no, Lisa shouted, but it was too late. The fragment sparked and writhed on the table. Its blue light flickered wildly as it tried to process what had just happened. For a moment it seemed confused, like it couldn't understand why someone would attack it with such a primitive tool when there were advanced weapons available. Look at it, Rick said excitedly. It's trying to adapt to being hit with a wrench, but it can't figure out the pattern because there isn't one. I just hit it because I felt like it. The fragment continued to pulse erratically for several minutes before finally settling into a new configuration. But Lisa noticed something important. It took longer to adapt this time, she said, studying her readings. When I used scientific methods, it adapted in minutes. Your random attack took it almost 10 minutes to process. Ben crossed his arms. Are you saying we should fight the most advanced enemy in the galaxy with wrenches? Not exactly, Rick grinned. But I'm saying we should fight them with the human approach. No grand strategies, no logical progressions, just pure chaos. Over the next week, Rick worked with a team of engineers and military strategists to develop what he called Chaos Protocol. The idea was simple in theory, but almost impossible for trained military minds to accept. Instead of following standard tactics, human forces would do whatever seemed least logical at any given moment. Commander Melissa Grant was one of the military officers assigned to the project. She had spent 20 years learning proper combat. Tactics and Rick's ideas made her head hurt. Let me see if I understand this, she said during one of their planning meetings. When the enemy expects us to retreat, we attack. When they expect us to use our strongest weapons, we use weak ones. When they expect coordinated assault, we act randomly. Exactly, Rick nodded enthusiastically. The key is that we can't even plan it too much in advance because planning creates patterns and patterns can be analyzed. General Harper looked skeptical. This goes against everything we know about military strategy. That's the point, Rick replied. Everything we know about military strategy is what the harvesters are learning to counter. We need to do things that don't make sense, because they can't adapt to nonsense. The first test of Chaos Protocol came sooner than anyone expected. Captain Pete Anderson was commanding the newly built UCS Defiance when long-range sensors detected something approaching human space. What do we have, sensors? Pete asked his tactical officer. 3 unknown ships, Captain. They matched the profile of Harvester scouts based on the refugee descriptions. Pete felt his heart rate increase. This was it. Humanity's first real encounter with the enemy that was destroying the galaxy. All hands to battle stations, he ordered, and activate Chaos Protocol. His crew had been training for weeks, but Pete could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Everything they were about to do went against their training and instincts. The Harvester ships were unlike anything in human experience. They looked like living creatures made of black metal, with surfaces that shifted and flowed like water. Energy weapons emerged from their hulls like teeth from a predator's mouth. "They're scanning us, Captain," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communication station. "Analyzing our weapons and defenses." "Perfect," Pete said with a grin that felt more confident than he actually was. "Let them analyze this." Instead of using the Defiance's main weapons, Pete ordered his crew to fire their emergency flares directly at the enemy ships. The bright, colorful lights were designed for signaling, not combat, and they did no damage to the Harvester vessels. But something interesting happened. The enemy ships paused, their scanning intensified, and Pete could almost sense their confusion. They had expected weapons fire and were prepared to adapt to energy beams or missiles. Flares were not in their database of logical responses. "Now hit them with everything we've got," Pete ordered. The Defiance's real weapons opened fire while the Harvesters were still trying to process the flare attack. Energy beams and missiles struck the enemy ships before they could adapt their defenses. One Harvester ship exploded immediately. The other two began to adapt, their hulls shifting to absorb the energy weapons. But Pete was already switching tactics. "Ramming speed," he ordered. "Sir?" his helmsman asked in shock. "You heard me. Ram the ship on the left." The Defiance charged forward like an ancient warrior with a spear. The Harvester ship tried to move away, but it was too late. The human vessel struck it at full speed, tearing through its hull with brute force. Pete's ship was damaged, but the Harvester was crippled. The third enemy vessel, apparently realizing it was outmatched by this insane opponent, fled back toward deep space. "Damage report," Pete called out as his crew worked to control the fires breaking out across several decks. "Hull breach on deck 7. Engines at 60%, but we're alive, Captain," reported his chief engineer. Pete looked at the wreckage of the 2 destroyed Harvester ships floating in space. "Get me Admiral Sullivan." When Kate's face appeared on the main screen, Pete was grinning despite the smoke drifting across his bridge. "Admiral, Chaos Protocol works. The Harvesters couldn't adapt fast enough to our random tactics. We actually beat them." Kate's expression was a mixture of relief and amazement. "Casualties?" 12 injured, no deaths. And Captain, there's something else. When the surviving Harvester ship retreated, it was broadcasting some kind of signal. Our alien friends say it was calling for help." Kate's smile faded. "How long do we have?" "Based on the signal's direction and what we know about their speed, maybe 2 weeks before more arrive." Kate nodded grimly. "Then we'd better get ready. If word of this gets out to the Confederation, they're going to want our help." "Will we give it to them?" Pete asked. "After how they treated us." Kate was quiet for a moment, thinking about the proud aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive and worthless. Then she thought about the billions of lives that would be lost if the Harvesters continued their advance. "Yes, we'll help them," she said finally. "But they're going to have to ask nicely." Within days, news of humanity's victory spread through the remaining Confederation networks. For the first time in months, there was hope in the galaxy. The species that had written off humans as too primitive to matter were suddenly very interested in learning more about Chaos Protocol. But Kate knew this was just the beginning. 3 scout ships were nothing compared to the massive fleets advancing toward the galaxy's core. The real test was still coming, and when it arrived, humanity would need every crazy, illogical, unreasonable tactic they could think of. The aliens had ignored humanity, but the Harvesters were about to learn that being ignored by the galaxy's most chaotic species was the biggest mistake they could make. The alien ship that arrived at Earth's orbital defense platform was nothing like the proud vessels that had once carried the Confederation's diplomats. This ship was scarred and broken, held together with emergency repairs that looked desperate. Its hull showed the telltale signs of harvester weapons, strange corrosion that ate away at metal like acid. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched through the observation deck as the alien vessel limped into the docking bay. She had been expecting this visit for weeks, ever since word of humanity's victory over the Harvester Scouts had spread through the galaxy. "Admiral, they're requesting permission to come aboard," reported Commander Tony Rivers from the communications station. "The message is from someone called Quillshard." Kate felt a grim satisfaction. The same crystal being who had dismissed humanity as too primitive now needed their help. "Tell him he can come aboard, but only with a small group. And Tony? Make sure our security teams are ready." 20 minutes later, Kate stood in the main conference room watching as the alien delegation entered. Quillshard looked nothing like the proud being who had once commanded the High Assembly. His crystal body was cracked in several places, and his internal light was dim and flickering. Behind him came two other aliens Kate recognized from the refugee reports. The first was Trilsong, an aquatic being from the Delphini species. She moved in a water-filled mobility suit that hissed and bubbled with each step. Her large, dark eyes showed the same exhaustion that marked all the survivors. The second alien was harder to look at directly. Bright Thought was a collective consciousness of energy beings called the Luminar. It appeared as a shifting pattern of lights that hurt human eyes if viewed too long. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Admiral Sullivan," Quillshard began, and Kate noticed that his voice no longer carried the arrogant tone it had held at Nexus Prime. "We come seeking assistance in humanity's name." President Charles Nixon, who had arrived from Earth an hour earlier, leaned forward in his chair. "That's interesting language considering how you treated our delegation a few months ago." Quillshard's light flickered with what might have been shame. "We were mistaken in our assessment of your species. Recent events have forced us to reconsider many of our beliefs." General Rachel Kim, who had been studying reports from the front lines, spoke up. "How bad is it out there?" Trilsong's translator. Device made gurgling sounds as she answered. 4 more species have been completely consumed. The harvester fleet now numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Our combined forces cannot stop them. "What about your superior technology?" asked Dr. Amy Foster. "Your weapons that are supposedly so much more advanced than ours." Bright thoughts. Lights pulsed in patterns that suggested distress. "Useless, all useless. The harvesters adapt to everything we use against them. Weapons that worked for millions of years are now ineffective within hours of first contact." Kate walked to the room's main display, which showed a map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas that had been consumed by the harvesters, and the pattern was clear. The enemy was moving steadily toward the galactic core, where most of the major civilizations were located. "Why should we help you?" Kate asked bluntly. "You called us primitive. You told us we weren't worthy to join your alliance. You said we needed to stay in our corner of space and not bother the grown-ups." Quillshard was quiet for a long moment. Then his crystal body dimmed even further. "Because you are our only hope. Your chaotic methods are the only thing that has worked against the harvesters. Without human assistance, every thinking being in this galaxy will be consumed. And if we refuse?" President Nixon asked. "Then the galaxy dies," Trilsong replied simply. "And eventually the harvesters will reach your space anyway. You might delay them for a few years, but you cannot stop them alone." Kate looked around the room at her advisors. She could see the conflict in their faces. The aliens had treated humanity badly, but billions of innocent lives were at stake. "What exactly are you proposing?" Kate asked. Bright Thought's lights shifted to a brighter pattern. "A joint command structure. Human officers would lead combined fleets using your chaos methods. Our ships and technology would serve under human tactical command." The room fell silent. The idea of humans commanding alien fleets would have been laughable just months ago. Now it might be the galaxy's only chance for survival. "There would be conditions," President Nixon said finally. "First, any species that survives this war owes humanity full membership in whatever replaces the Confederation. Second, human colonies get equal treatment and protection. Third, we want access to all your medical and scientific knowledge." "Agreed," Quillshard said without hesitation. "Anything you require." The next 2 weeks were chaos of a different kind as human and alien forces tried to work together. Admiral Tony Rivers found himself commanding a mixed fleet of ships from 6 different species, each with their own technology and customs. "Admiral, the crystal ships are refusing to follow formation," reported Captain Lisa Chen from her human destroyer. "They say our tactics are too random to be safe." Tony rubbed his temples. Working with alien crews was like trying to teach cats to march in formation. "Tell them that random is the point. If we're predictable, we're dead." The real test came when they received reports of a massive harvester fleet approaching the Vorthak homeworld. This would be the largest battle yet, with over 300 alien ships fighting alongside 50 human vessels. General Rachel Kim was in overall command of the operation from her flagship, the UCS Liberation. She stood on the bridge watching the tactical display as both fleets moved toward each other through space. "General, the aliens are requesting permission to use their standard battle formations," reported her tactical officer Commander Mike Bradley. "Denied," Rachel said firmly. "If they use standard formations, the harvesters will adapt and counter them within minutes. Tell all ships to follow Chaos Protocol Alpha." Chaos Protocol Alpha was one of the most difficult strategies for alien crews to understand. Instead of coordinated attacks, each ship would act independently, making random decisions based on immediate circumstances. It was like trying to fight a battle with no plan at all. The harvester fleet was enormous. Over 800 ships of varying sizes, all covered in the same flowing black metal that seemed to shift and change as they watched. When the two fleets met, the battle looked more like a bar fight than a military engagement. Human ships dove and rolled in unpredictable patterns, firing weapons at seemingly random targets. One human captain launched all his escape pods at enemy ships, then followed up with his main guns. Another used his tractor beams to grab space debris and throw it at harvester vessels. The alien crews, following human orders, found themselves doing things that went against millions of years of military tradition. A crystal ship rammed an enemy vessel, then exploded its own power core to take out 2 more. A Delphini captain flooded his ship's corridors with water and used it as a giant water balloon against a harvester that had adapted to energy weapons. The harvesters tried to adapt, but every time they analyzed one attack pattern, the humans switched to something completely different. Some human ships fought alone, others formed temporary groups that dissolved as quickly as they had formed. "General, look at this," her sensor operator called out. "The harvester ships are starting to make mistakes." Rachel looked at the display and saw something amazing. The enemy ships, which had moved with perfect coordination at the start of the battle, were now showing signs of confusion. Some were firing at empty space where human ships had been seconds before. Others were trying to adapt to threats that no longer existed. "They're overloading," Dr. Foster's voice came through the communication system from Earth. "The harvesters are trying to process too many different threat patterns at once. Their adaptation systems can't keep up." The battle raged for 6 hours, but gradually the tide turned in favor of the combined fleet. Harvester ships began to retreat, something that had never happened before in any previous engagement. When the last enemy vessel disappeared into hyperspace, Rachel looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted and damage reports were coming in from ships throughout the fleet, but they had won. "Casualties?" she asked. 37 ships lost, about 8,000 crew members total, her executive officer reported. "But General, we destroyed over 200 harvester vessels. That's a victory ratio of 5 to 1. Rachel nodded grimly. They had proven that the Chaos Protocol could work on a large scale, but this was just one battle. The war was far from over, and the harvesters would learn from this defeat just as they learned from everything else. The real question was whether humanity could stay one step ahead of an enemy that never stopped adapting. The heart of the galaxy was burning. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UCS Liberation, watching the massive structure that the harvesters had built around the central black hole. It looked like a spider web made of dark metal, stretching across millions of miles of space, slowly draining energy from the galaxy's core. "Admiral, long-range sensors show over 10,000 harvester ships defending that thing," reported Commander Danny Walsh. "This is their entire fleet." Kate nodded grimly. Intelligence reports had confirmed their worst fears. The harvesters weren't just consuming individual star systems anymore. They were trying to drain the galaxy's central black hole to power their expansion into other galaxies. If they succeeded, every star in the galaxy would eventually die. How long do we have? Kate asked Dr. Amy Foster, who was monitoring the energy readings from her science station. At their current rate of extraction, maybe 6 months before the damage becomes permanent, Amy replied. After that, even if we destroy the facility, the galaxy will slowly collapse into darkness. Kate looked around the command center at the GI. Mixed crew of humans and aliens working together. It had taken months to reach this point, and the cost had been enormous. Entire fleets had been sacrificed to clear a path to the galactic core, and billions of lives had been lost on both sides. Signal the fleet, Kate ordered. All ships prepare for final assault. The United Galactic Defense Force had grown to over 2,000 ships from dozens of different species, all under human command. It was the largest fleet in galactic history, but it was still outnumbered 5-1 by the harvesters. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from the UCS Liberty. Admiral, strike teams are ready to deploy. We've got volunteers from every species in the fleet. The plan was desperate, even by human standards. While the main fleet engaged the Harvester Armada, small strike teams would attempt to reach the processing facility's core and overload its quantum processors. The resulting explosion would destroy the facility but might also destabilize the black hole itself. Jake, I want you to know that what you're doing, there's a good chance none of you are coming back, Kate said quietly. We know, Admiral, but if we don't try, nobody's coming back anyway. Kate took a deep breath. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Today we fight not just for our own species, but for every living thing in this galaxy. The enemy thinks they understand us now, but they're about to learn that humans have one more trick they haven't seen yet. She paused, looking out at the harvester fleet that stretched across the view screen like a dark tide. We're going to do something so crazy, so completely insane, that their adaptation systems won't know how to process it. We're going to win this war by being magnificently, beautifully human. All ships, attack. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The human fleet charged directly at the center of the harvester formation, ignoring the logical strategy of attacking from the flanks. At the same time, alien ships following human orders scattered in every direction, some attacking, some retreating, some flying in circles for no apparent reason. The harvesters tried to respond with their usual adaptive tactics, but the human strategy changed every few minutes. Ships that had been retreating suddenly turned and attacked. Vessels that appeared to be fleeing launched surprise missile strikes. The entire battle became a swirling chaos that looked more like a natural disaster than a military engagement. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison led his strike team toward the processing facility. His ship carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens, including Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, who had volunteered to help with the technical aspects of overloading the facility. Captain, we're through the outer defenses, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim. But there are Guardian ships surrounding the core facility. Jake looked at the tactical display. Dozens of massive harvester vessels, each one the size of a small moon, orbited around the facility's central processing unit. These were the most advanced ships in the harvester fleet, designed specifically to protect their most important asset. Lisa, how long do you need to overload those processors? Jake asked. At least 20 minutes of direct access to the core systems, Lisa replied. And that's if everything goes perfectly. Jake made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in any normal military. All strike ships, this is Morrison. We're going to ram those Guardian vessels. Sir? Came several shocked voices over the communication system. You heard me. Full ramming speed. We'll punch a hole through their defenses with our ships themselves. It was suicide, and everyone knew it, but it was also so completely unreasonable that the harvesters couldn't predict or counter it. The Guardian ships tried to move away from the incoming human vessels, but they were too large and slow to avoid the smaller, faster strike ships. One by one, human ships slammed into the massive harvester Guardians at full speed. The explosions lit up space like new stars being born. Jake's ship was one of the last to reach the facility's core, and by then his hull was cracked and his engines were failing. "Lisa, get to that core," Jake ordered as his ship's emergency system screamed warnings about hull breaches and radiation leaks. Lisa and her team ran through the damaged corridors of Jake's ship toward the airlocks. They would have to spacewalk across to the facility itself, hoping their suits would protect them from the energy radiation pouring out of the damaged processing systems. Back in the main battle, Kate watched as her fleet continued its chaotic assault on the Harvester Armada. The enemy ships were making more and more mistakes as their adaptation systems overloaded from trying to process the constantly changing human tactics. "Admiral, we're getting reports from all sectors," Danny called out. "The Harvesters are starting to retreat from the outer edges of the battle." Kate felt a spark of hope. "Are we winning?" "It's hard to tell, but their formation is breaking down. Some of their ships are attacking each other by mistake." At the facility's core, Lisa worked frantically with the alien processing systems while Jake and his remaining crew held off Harvester boarding parties. The quantum processors were massive machines that seemed to bend space around them, and figuring out how to overload them was like trying to solve a puzzle while the building was on fire. "I think I've got it," Lisa called out over the sound of weapons fire echoing through the facility. "But when these things go, they're going to take out everything within 1,000,000 miles. Jake activated his communicator. "Admiral Sullivan, this is Morrison. We're about to blow this thing, but you need to get the fleet clear. Everyone needs to jump to hyperspace in the next 5 minutes." Kate's voice was steady despite the chaos around her. "Understood, Jake. It's been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine, Admiral. Tell Earth that humanity kept its promise." Kate turned to her communications officer. "All ships, emergency retreat. Jump to hyperspace immediately." As the fleet began to disappear into faster-than-light travel, Lisa completed her work on the processors. The machines began to pulse with unstable energy, and alarms that sounded like screaming filled the facility. Jake looked around at his crew, human and alien alike, who had followed him on this final mission. "Well, everyone, looks like we're about to become part of galactic history." The explosion that followed was visible from halfway across the galaxy. The processing facility and the Harvester fleet protecting it were vaporized instantly. The black hole itself flared with energy as the artificial drain on its power was suddenly removed, sending waves of gravitational disturbance rippling through space. When the fleet emerged from hyperspace at a safe distance, they found that the Harvester threat was over. The remaining enemy ships, cut off from their central command and processing facility, began to drift aimlessly through space. Without the facility to provide them with new adaptations and energy, they slowly shut down one by one. Kate stood in the observation lounge of her ship, looking out at the stars that would continue to shine because of what humanity and its allies had accomplished. The cost had been enormous, but the galaxy was safe. A month later, Kate found herself back on Earth, watching as representatives from dozens of species signed the charter for the new Galactic Union. Humanity wasn't just a member of this alliance, they were its leaders, chosen by species that had once considered them too primitive to notice. The war had taught everyone a valuable lesson about the power of thinking differently, of embracing chaos instead of fearing it, and of never underestimating those who seemed weak or insignificant. As Kate watched the signing ceremony, she thought about Jake Morrison and all the others who had sacrificed themselves to save the galaxy. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes from being willing to do something completely unreasonable in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy had ignored humanity once, but it would never make that mistake again.